Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Fred Pitsadney. I'm the president and founder of Focus Management. I'll be joined by Richard Jarofsky, who is a partner that will be part of presenting this webinar. Just before we begin, there's a few housekeeping items to look after. First of all, for those of you that like to take notes like I do during webinars, please feel free to do that. However, you need to know that we are going to be making a recording of this webinar, and we'll send that to you in a few days. Secondly, for those of you that would like to have some questions and would like them answered at the end of the session, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll do our best to answer those at the end of the session. 8 or 9 months ago, the tone and the subject matter for this webinar would have been so different. The focus would have been on planning how to successfully scale that next peak off in the distance, that peak representing the goals for the business. But then, with very little warning, everything changed. In the space of a very few short months, the COVID outbreak turned our world literally upside down. Our choices, our options have been severely limited. Now we all need to act very quickly, act decisively, and respond to changes that come at us just about every day as we move towards a new normal, whatever that becomes. To survive and thrive in today's unsettling and turbulent environment, we all need to rethink how we approach planning, managing, and executing our critical priorities. We need to take the tools that we're familiar with and reshape them to fit the world we now find ourselves in. And how has that world changed? Well, for starters, it shut down. Planes stopped flying. Borders were closed. People returning home from abroad were either placed in quarantine or voluntarily into isolation. You couldn't go where you wanted to. If you did, you couldn't get back. Buyers couldn't buy. Sellers couldn't sell. Shippers couldn't ship. Oh, excuse me. Makers couldn't make. Every economy everywhere took a severe blow to the head. And on top of all of this, we didn't know what was coming next. We are now in the second wave. Is there going to be another one? How much longer for a vaccine? Well, we got some really good news from Pfizer a couple of days ago. So hopefully that's around the corner. What about an antiviral? When will it be safe to go back to something we used to call normal? This pandemic is crushing many paradigms. How we make purchases and what we buy. How we do business and who we do it with, how our businesses operate internally, how we communicate with each other, and the list goes on. In the face of this, we need to recognize an important reality. Whoever acts the fastest and most decisively will set the pace. And to do this, we need to rethink our approach to planning. In fact, to a large degree, we need to rethink how we think, and especially how we think about planning. So what are the goals for today? There are 3 of them, which are designed to provide you with a guide or a roadmap on how you can adapt your planning toolkit to today's realities. The overall goal is to introduce the RAD process, which we have successfully used with our clients. We'll start by reviewing the underlying key principles that will help you move quickly through your planning and execution stages. We'll start by reviewing the underlying key principles that will help you move quickly through your planning and execution stages. And we'll introduce you to some specific tools and techniques that are immensely helpful in today's turbulent and uncertain world. Let's start where RAD came from. The fundamental value proposition for all of our work, and then we'll cover the 4 principles, the tools and the techniques, the how-tos, RAD's Fit, who stands to benefit most from taking the RAD approach. Every leader, whether of a business unit or a team within, wants the great execution of what matters most, especially today in the pandemic environment, what really matters most. And they want the great execution of that. Great execution, however, remains elusive. as most, in fact, it's been published that 75% still struggle with the execution of not only strategic, but operational and project plans. So where do organizations end up if they don't end up in the great execution of what matters most? Well, often it's one of these other quadrants. Let's start with the orange quadrant, the poor execution of what matters most. You know, this is an organization that's got a great plan, but can't seem to execute. So this is where you find leaders with lots of frustration who keep asking, why are we late? Why did we miss the guidelines, the timelines again? Why are there so many errors? Why? Well, you get the idea. All those questions out of frustration. The yellow quadrant, the great execution of the wrong things, often leads to major embarrassment as the leader answers questions like, hey, if we're so great at getting things done, why is the competition still eating our lunch? Why have we missed our fundraising goal? Why have we, again, you get the idea, a lot of questions because of the situation they're in. The black zone is that color for a reason. Businesses and their leaders don't last very long. Poor execution of the wrong things is a major reason that the majority of startups never see year two, and the reason why businesses that have been around for years and years and years all of a sudden are off the market. There are three elements that help leaders take their commitment, take their teams to the top right-hand quadrant, the great execution of what matters most. It's clarity, alignment, and commitment. Well, clarity, alignment, and commitment of what exactly? For strategy execution, it's clarity, alignment, and to the long-term focus and direction of the business. Well, today, it's different. It's about identifying the critical priorities, what we need to do today to survive. And in some cases, it's how to deal with unusually big demands for products and services. The bottom axis is about ensuring clarity, alignment, and commitment to action for individual accountabilities. Great ideas, and that's all a strategic plan is, or an operational plan. It's an intention. All great ideas need to turn into work for somebody. Not being clear and empowered to take action or to make decisions is, according to published studies and our own 50 years of experience with 400 organizations, it's the #1 blockage of great execution. We'll be addressing how to fix that during this webinar. For the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to focus on the 4 principles, but have a look at the GEM model first of all. You see on the right-hand side, GEM, that's what leaders want. They want to be in the top right-hand quadrant. They want to be in the green box, the great execution of what matters most. The RAD approach adds speed. You got to move quickly, and agility. You got to turn on a dime. And when you combine those two components together, you get RAD. So for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to focus on the 4 principles you can use to catch the wave and not be crushed by it. These 4 principles will be supported by 6 specific techniques and tools. Let's overview the principles first. First of all, engage your people in the process of planning and deploying your action, and do it early. You know, we've heard a lot of talk about employee engagement during the last decade. They're mostly empty words, as most organizations are not really doing a better job at it than they were at the turn of the century. Not when it comes to real, meaningful engagement. Quickly means exactly that. Quickly, speed, make decisions quickly. Not weeks or months, it's in days. Power through the execution by doing a few critical processes, doing them right and doing them right over and over again. Planning sessions should be short bursts, like 1 to 2 hours long, perhaps 90 minutes, not 1 or 2 days as we are accustomed to. You've all heard the saying, no plan survives the first engagement with the enemy, or variations on that theme. Well, it's more than a truism. A plan that fails to address the rapidly changing realities on the ground is worse than useless, is downright dangerous. Agility, moving quickly, and responsiveness, adapting, will rule. The 4th and the final principle is this, that nothing stops a great plan achieving the success it deserves more than the people charged with its execution, only having a vague idea of the authority that they have to make decisions and to get important stuff done. Execution loves clarity. Fuzziness is the enemy of execution, and we're going to cover how to fix that fuzziness today. There are 4 principles. Let's dig into each of them and put some meat on the bones. There are 2 important reasons to ask your people about their views and their ideas. The first is that they really want to be asked. People want to be involved. They want to feel that someone actually cares about what they think. I mean, in their position, wouldn't you? The second reason is that they know things that you don't, not necessarily because they're brighter or smarter, but because they're closer to the action, closer to customers, closer to suppliers and competitors. So if you want to know something about customers, suppliers, and competitors, ask them. I mean, the last thing you want to hear during a debrief, especially of a failed initiative, is this: I could have told you that. You never want to hear those words. It only makes sense that if you ask questions, you need to listen to the answers. I mean, nothing turns people off more than taking the trouble to respond to a question and then to be ignored. Most of us have been in that situation. It's not a great experience. That must not happen. It's critical to respond in some fashion throughout the entire process. Ask people early enough in the process to make their input useful. This is during the assessment stage, prior to putting pen to paper and creating a plan to take the business forward. This should be one of the very first things you do. There are a variety of tools, many available at really low cost, that can be used to gather the input from your people. SurveyMonkey is one, and there are others. Keep it very simple. Don't ask too elaborate or complicated questions, but ask a few of them. Make them very clear. Again, execution hates fuzziness. Make the questions clear as to why the answers matter. We'll look at a couple of examples in just a minute. Whatever information you gather, it needs to fit into your battle planning. Now, why do we call it battle planning? Well, because battle planning to us conveys a completely different level of intensity than conventional strategic planning. This isn't about winning the war. It is about achieving the success we need today that creates a secure and positive tomorrow. The first thing we need to do is quickly come to grips with the situation that we find ourselves in. So particularly in 5 key areas of importance. What is life like today for our customers? How are they being affected? How are their attitudes, their preferences, and behaviors changing? What new challenges are they having that might represent opportunities for us? Maybe their need for what we do is decreased, or perhaps increased due to the present situation. You know, for instance, the dramatic drop in commercial and civil aviation has had a terrible negative impact on the companies that service and repair aircraft components, such as wheels and brakes. Sailmakers, on the other hand, those who have the capability, have gained from the surge in demand for covers to protect engines as aircraft sit idle. What about our suppliers? Now, we depend on them to operate our business. So how are they holding up? Do we need to be looking for alternatives? We can't afford to have a supply chain that is unreliable due to capacity constraints. As borders close, many experience logistical nightmares and still haven't been able to establish a secure supply of materials and components. As for our competitors, are they showing any signs of weakness that we can exploit? Have their service levels dropped significantly? Are they losing customers? Is there a fire sale opportunity out there? Maybe we can snap up some smaller companies that are struggling so that we can expand our reach. If we don't, someone else might. One of our clients, a maker of plumbing products, experienced a huge increase in the demand for their products because they service the home rental market. You know, because of many of their competitors were either unable to operate or had their supply chains disrupted. Their big challenge, and put this under nice problem to have, was how are we going to make enough of our product quickly enough to take advantage of this windfall? Our client describes that situation as like trying to drink from a fire hose. What about our people? How are they doing? This has been a very stressful time for many, perhaps all. Are we doing what we can do to help them through this? For example, one of our clients shifted work hours to help those who are having difficulty managing their childcare. Finally, we need to appraise our operational capability and our capacity. Are we able to service level requirements and remain cost efficient? If we have excess capacity, can it be redeployed to other areas? As an example, look at the number of companies today that are now making respirators and masks. Remember the survey I mentioned a few moments ago? Well, there are a few questions, here are a few of the questions that we ask. First of all, what one thing within our power? Don't ask questions that we can't do anything about. It only frustrates the people that ask them and the management team. So what one thing within our power could we do to help you and others deal and cope better? The first thing you need to do is ask your people, how can we help you? Then how about our customers? What can we do to serve them better? After all, a business without customers is, well, it just isn't. What ideas do you have on how we can bond better with them? Perhaps become the trusted go-to company. Maybe even become indispensable. We might be suffering operationally, and our less than great performance is damaging our reputation and causing frustration. How can we address those concerns and get better? The answers you need or you receive need to be sorted, sifted, collated, organized, and analyzed. Look for those nuggets, especially those that might at first glance seem a little kind of off the page. Sometimes there's some really good ideas in there. Include those nuggets in the conversation you have with your core planning team. Set a very small number of objectives. We'll be talking about that over and over again. One of the common errors that we see our clients make is developing these long laundry lists of objectives, to-dos. So set a very small number of objectives whose achievement will make a significant impact on the business. Make sure that they're clear. Remember, the fuzziness is the enemy of execution. Make sure they're clear both in what they are and why they matter. And make them as measurable as possible so you can track your progress. You need to know where you are. I mean, something like this: increase full order on-time shipment rate to 96% by December 31st without increasing per unit shipping costs. That's a very smart objective. This objective not only drives increased internal efficiency, it also benefits the customer. It's a win-win. Do it quickly. Lean towards action rather than deep contemplation. We need to spend more time in planning sessions on creating action plans and then delivering on those action plans. Make your planning sessions short, as we mentioned earlier, 1 to 2 hours. 90 minutes is actually a great target. And place them in a tight timeline, whatever you can accommodate, but don't stretch it out. Think about doing 2 or even 3 sessions in a week during the assessment and planning stages. Keep it simple, people. You're going to hear a lot about that. Keep it simple should be your mantra throughout the process. A beautiful, well-articulated plan on paper breaks down if people aren't clear on what they need to do and how the various elements all fit together so it can be successful. In a moment, we'll look at some very powerful yet simple ways of ensuring the clarity of your plan. The most common cause of execution, now listen up, the most common cause of execution failure is that people don't know what's expected of them, what they're supposed to do, or the authority that is available to them. And we're going to cover more about that authority clarification in just a few minutes. Complexity is a major barrier when it comes to deciding what to do and then executing it. Rich is going to cover some of the simple yet very powerful tools and techniques that you can use. You know, the best thing is that these tools are already in your toolkit. You just have to apply them a little differently. So Richard will include how to make the planning execution roles crystal clear. So Richard, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Fred. Good morning, everyone. Now, Fred has given you a nice overview of RAD, talked about how RAD connects with great execution of what matters most. What I want to do is spend some time getting into a little bit more detail. So how does RAD work? And also get into some of the tools, and many of these are sort of traditional tools and methods that we've been using for years, but we've reshaped them, retooled them a bit to work in particular with today's environment. So I want to talk about, first of all, about the battle planning process, our second principle. And I want to go through it. And basically, battle planning is broken down into a number of phases or stages. And the first of those is getting ready. I mean, anytime you're going to sit down and perhaps bring a group of people together to do some planning, you got to make sure that you're ready to do it. And there are 4 major activities involved here. And the first of those is to figure out, well, who's going to be on that planning team? Because they need to know and they need to understand what's going on. So we need to also orient them, make sure they're up to speed on terms of what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to go about doing it. We also then need to identify the employees that are going to be surveyed. Now, in a small organization, the answer might be everybody. In a larger organization, it might be most people or some people. In a very large organization, it might come down to saying, you know what, maybe we need to segment this. We need to look at different departments, different functions, different divisions, whatever the case. But we need to identify who those people are, because the next thing to do is, in fact, to issue the survey, to distribute and invite people to participate. And then, of course, once they've done that, we got to then compile and analyze the survey results and then feed that back into the core planning team in terms of the pre-work that's required as they engage the process from that point forward. Now, this represents about 5 days of activity. And typically, we're talking about the week prior to the initiation rather, of the planning process itself. And that planning process really begins with assessment. And we break it down into 3 work sessions. As Fred said earlier, you know, these are not day-long sessions or multi-day sessions. This is really a case of saying, let's have a very tight agenda. Let's look at perhaps an hour to 2 hour window of time within which to do this. And let's be really efficient and really effective. So the 3 work sessions within assessment, first of all, the first one looks at customers, suppliers, and competitors. This is looking outside the organization and saying what's going on out there that we really need to be talking more about, understanding better, and maybe figuring out what to do about. Well, then once we've looked outside, then we need to look inside. We need to think about our own people. We need to look at ourselves in terms of our operational capability and our capacity and really understand what the pressure points are that we're feeling today. Where are we constrained? But also, what sort of things are going on that might create great opportunities for us? Well, having done all of that, looking outside and inside, which might generate a long list of things that we could talk about, well, the reality is we don't want to take that much time to talk about that many things. So the 3rd work session is really about boiling it down to the critical few, and I'll underscore few, priorities. Well, this is days 1 to 5 of a RAD cycle. So if you thought about it starting on a Monday, it says that by Friday, essentially, we have completed the assessment phase of RAD, and we've got that sort of finger on the pulse. At this point, we really know what sorts of things should drive the conversation forward as we proceed. Well, now we get into the actual planning itself. And the first thing we need to do when we're going to create a plan is to come up with, well, what are we trying to accomplish exactly? What are our objectives on the near horizon? Again, this is not strategic planning. We're not looking out 18, 24, 36 months, 5 years, whatever the case. We're really talking about maybe a 3 to 6 month period and saying, what sort of measurable objectives do we need to accomplish in order to know that we're moving forward as a business? Well, then having done that, of course, those things aren't going to happen by themselves. So we've got to figure out, well, what could we do, first of all, in order to move towards those objectives? And then ultimately selecting from maybe a long list of possibilities, the few most impactful things that will drive us forward. And then for each of those, well, who's going to lead it? Who probably on that core planning team is going to accept accountability, take accountability for it, and own the leadership of that particular initiative. And then finally, having done that, we need to talk about resources, because if I've taken on an initiative and away I go, I get partway down that path and I realize I don't have everything that I need, or perhaps every one that I need, in order to do this efficiently and effectively, in order to be successful. So resourcing should be established right up front. And the other piece of it, which Fred mentioned earlier, is also about authority, because likewise, I might get to partway down that path and be not clear about what sort of authority I've got. And that's going to tend to either slow me down, or in some cases, have me making some bad choices that I might pay for and the business might pay for as well. Well, within the RAD cycle, this is days 8 to 15. Essentially, it's the second week of the process. And at this point, we've got a plan. We've got some clear measures of success. We've got objectives, got ownership and authority in relation to the initiatives as well. So that's really all RAD through to the planning stage. What I want to do now is talk a little bit about some of the tools and techniques that our clients are finding particularly useful these days. And the first of those is something that we call the 3W chart. And why we call it the 3W chart is probably pretty obvious from looking at it. It's what, it's who, and it's when. So whatever the action item might be, whatever the initiative might be, this is a way of recording very clearly what's going to happen, who's going to make sure that it happens, and then finally the time by when that action or initiative is to be completed, not started. It's easy to say when we're going to start, but the commitment needs to be when it's going to be completed. Well, quite often teams do a great job in terms of identifying these things, but they come to a particular item on that list, like number 3, making the decision, and they say, well, you know what, it's really Robin and Tony together that need to make that decision. So we put both their names in the list. And our counter to that is absolutely, this sounds like a shared thing to do, but who's ultimately accountable for making sure that it does happen? And who's accountable for making sure that it's done well and it's done on time? So then the team discusses that. They decide that in fact, it's going to be Robin. We put an asterisk next to the name and say, okay, great. Robin has ultimate accountability for it, and Tony is also involved in a substantial way. Well, that captures the basics, the what, the who, and the when. In some cases, the client says, I want to add more information to it. That's not all that I need. And I say, great. What do you need? Well, it might be resources, for instance, to say, we need other people involved. We need technology. We need funding. We need whatever it is. So let's capture that information on the 3W chart and basically create, if you will, an enhanced version. Now, having done this, this information can be managed a number of ways. It could be in a Word document, it could be an Excel document, so I can sort, sift, collate, generate graphs to my heart's content. In some cases, a client will take that information, move it into a project management application because they want that level of sophistication. So that's the 3W. Here's another tool that in particular these days, and especially as we're doing meetings more and more online virtually, as opposed to face-to-face, tightly gathered around the table, that clients are finding particularly useful. Now, historically, we often referred to these as ground rules, meeting ground rules, rules of order, whatever the case. We now call them rules of engagement for a couple of reasons. One is that it sort of fits with the motif of battle planning. It's kind of a military sort of thing. But more than that, it's really about a focus on executing, and it's a focus around efficiency. So here are 5 that we find particularly helpful, and our clients really think, they appreciate them very much. And the first of those is to make your point and do it quickly. This is not about long, drawn-out conversations. This is not about deep contemplation. This is about getting to the point quickly, figuring out what to do with it, like make a decision or put an action item down, but not spending a lot of time at it. That's settling with close and appreciating the fact that for now, close has to be good enough. Teams often get in the trap of seeking perfection and spending hours or even days deliberating and working it out to 5 decimal places when quite honestly, 1 would have been sufficient. So let's settle for close is good enough. Keeping focused, no sidetracking, especially doing meetings online. And likewise, having one speaker. When there are multiple people talking during a meeting, if it's online virtual, it's hard to figure out sometimes even who's doing the talking or where the conversation is really going. And then finally, the 80% rule. And the 80% rule is a bit like number 2, but it recognizes in particular the fact that every conversation, every decision-making process reaches a point of diminishing returns. We're not adding anything new, nothing of value. We just need to be circling. So someone within that meeting, anyone, which it could include the facilitator or a meeting participant, can simply ask the question, do you think we're 80% there? And the team can reflect for a second and people can say, yeah, you know what? Let's make this decision, let's record this action, and let's move on. So that's battle planning. Here's another one that's, well, it's kind of fun. It's got a bit of a playful name, Spitball decision making. And this isn't about the illegal pitch in baseball. It's more along the lines of, let's throw things against the wall and see what sticks. And where this comes from is the fact that whatever the objective might be, there are going to be multiple ways that we could approach accomplishing it. So there are going to be a bunch of things that we need to choose from maybe a long list of possibilities. So how are we going to do that? Well, we use Spitball. Now, here's a model that basically shows you a fairly basic version of Spitball decision making. It's got value benefit on the vertical and cost or effort on the horizontal. And we've broken it down into 4 major zones. So let me talk about them really quickly. The best deal zone, the green. Well, let's face it, this one says it's got a lot of value, it's going to return us a lot of benefit, and it's not going to cost very much or take much effort for us to implement. So this sounds like a really good deal, and quite honestly, you'd have to convince me not to do these kinds of things. We've got the justifiable zone, the blue zone, that says we're going to get a lot for doing it. On the other hand, it's going to take a fair bit of effort or cost to implement it, and it might be justifiable in the end, especially if there's not much over in the green zone. Well, we've got the why bother zone, things that aren't going to take much, but also aren't going to give much. And we'd say, well, truly, is it worth the effort at all? And then finally, the no way zone that says it's going to cost a lot for us to do that, and we're not going to get much in return. So truly, I think there's just no way we would do those kinds of things. And then, of course, life being life, there's the maybe zone in the middle, the gray zone, that says there are some things that we're just not sure exactly where to plot them. So what we need to do is think a little bit more about them and make those kinds of decisions. Well, let me give you an example. We have a client that was looking at making some changes on their shop floor. So they put a team together. The team, as it ought to, did some brainstorming. They came up with a list of about 130 suggestions, things that they thought would help improve them operationally and environmentally, physically on the shop floor. Well, having done that, they stood back and looked at the list and they saw 130 items and they thought, oh my gosh, there's just no way we could possibly do all those things. And in fact, we shouldn't do all of those things because some of them, quite honestly, aren't very good ideas when we think more about them. Others, in fact, conflict with each other. So they did a spitball and they took that list, they worked it down significantly to a much smaller list. Well, they stood back and looked at that list and they said, oh, guess what? It's still too many things. We need to do this again. They did a second round of spitballing and came up with the gems. And they said, okay, these are the few things that are going to make a real difference. And let's do a great job at executing them. Well, great. We made our decisions. We've got our plan. Things are happening. Now it's really about keeping agile and being responsive. And the real mantra here is checking on progress and doing it often. We can't be agile and responsive if we're not really paying attention to how well things are working and how well the implementation and the execution of our initiatives is going. Now, what does often mean? Well, often could mean several times a week in short bursts, 5-minute, 10-minute check-ins to cover the highlights or the lowlights in some cases and saying, okay, how's it going? What do we need to change? And let's move on. Now, on the subject of changing the plan, if it's not working, let's change it. It may be that we're doing the wrong things. It may be that we're doing the right things, but we may not be doing the best way. And as Einstein is famously known to have said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly, but expecting a different outcome. So let's be sane, let's be smart, and let's change the plan. Well, one way of doing that is something that we call calling an audible, and we've borrowed it from North American football. And you're probably familiar with this. So quarterback is in the huddle with the rest of the offensive team and he calls a play and says, okay, this is the play. And they break the huddle. They go down to the line of scrimmage, they get down, center goes down over the ball. The quarterback looks over the center at the alignment of the defense and quickly concludes that that's not the right play to run. In fact, if we run that play, it's not going to get us what we want, and it might in fact get us in real trouble. So the quarterback calls an audible, uses coded language to tell everyone, hey, we're not doing that play anymore. We're now going to do this play. Well, as you can imagine, there are two really important things about calling an audible. First thing is that everyone's got to hear it. It's got to be loud and clear. And if you've watched North American football and heard this going on, even in a crowded and noisy stadium, you'll hear that quarterback's voice. The second thing is that everyone now needs to know what's different, what's changing. If it's a different play, how do I need to now fit into that? How does my role change going forward? So that's calling an audible. The fourth principle, and Fred mentioned it earlier, is about delegating authority. Now for us, it's really about sufficient authority, that people are really, really nice and clear and that we specifically spell it out. But also that where we have the opportunity to do so, we give more authority because it will help people get things done more quickly. It will help them be more efficient. We often use an equation when we talk about authority, which is that giving someone responsibility without the authority frustrates them. If I'm responsible for an initiative and I don't feel as though I have enough authority to actually execute it in the most efficient way, I'm going to be frustrated. In fact, I might fail. And the next time that somebody comes to me and says, hey, could you do this? I'm going to find a reason and excuse, perhaps, not to. Another way of looking at the same sort of equation is that responsibility without authority results in delays. If I don't have enough authority, I'm going to stop and ask permission. I'm not going to be sure. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to be cautious, maybe over conservative, and it's going to slow me down and things are going to be delayed. Well, when we define authority, we like to keep it pretty simple. We use basically 4 levels, 4 buckets. Level 1 says, just do it. Don't ask me, don't tell me. For this kind of stuff, just go ahead and do it. Level 2, which is tell me after. When you do these kinds of things, you must tell me after you've done it. It's not a courtesy, it's an obligation. A level 3 that says, come to me first and tell me what you're about to do or what you are about to decide. And then level 4, which says, really make a suggestion. Tell me what you think ought to be done, explain the situation to me, and then I'll be the one to decide. Well, to help make this nice and clear, here's an example. This is a manager who is going to implement some improvements, some changes on the shop floor. Well, the first example here says basically, spend within your budget, follow the policies. This is pretty vanilla. It's a level 1. Just go ahead and do these kinds of things. Don't tell me, don't ask me. Approving new suppliers for ongoing operations, I'm going to make that a level 2. And here's why. Well, if you're going to change the supplier mix and someone comes to me in the hallway and says, hey, what's going on with the suppliers? I don't want to give them that dumb look back that says, I have no idea what you're talking about. I need to know after you've done it. That's a level 2. A level 3, in the case of where you're making changes, they're going to have some minor staff impact. I say, you know what, come and tell me first about things like that, because I might be able to give you some advice, some guidance, or inform you about things that are happening elsewhere in the organization. And then finally, level 4, where things are going to have significant impact, come and tell me what you think we ought to do, and then I will be the one to decide. Defining authority, these are things that can be used for projects, for initiatives, but also for the day-to-day things that people have to do in order to bring success to the organization. All right, Fred, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Richard. So how does RAD fit into today's COVID world? Well, leaders from all walks of life are really feeling pretty darn frustrated about how fast things are changing. They're worried and often uncertain about what they should be doing and, more importantly, how to do it. They're asking questions like, what are my critical priorities today? And what should I be doing about them so that what matters today gets done and gets done quickly? And this is exactly what the RAD approach delivers. If you look at the model again, we've got the great execution of what matters most. On the right-hand side, you add the speed, you add the agility, and you get RAD, right? Okay, so for those of you that would like some help, some professional guidance on how to implement RAD, we've been pretty creative on creating a model for you that makes it very, very affordable. So this is what it looks like. Um, we can offer you a fully facilitated, step-by-step, let's avoid the landmines facilitation of RAD. And of course, that has a price, and that price for that is $15,000. It might vary a little bit depending upon the number of people in your organization, because the survey process is a function of number of people. Okay, to make it a little more affordable, we've got another level of service that says, look, Fred, I understand it. It's great stuff. I love it, but I don't have 15 grand. So we've offered, we call the solo RAD. We're going to provide you with tons of templates, videos, guidelines, etc. And it's kind of a do-it-yourself kit, and that price is $1,500. It's 10% of the full meal deal. The next level of service is what we call the guided RAD, which says we will actually provide you with all the templates, the videos, the guides, plus some online live coaching sessions, and 7 of them because there are 7 different events during the RAD process, and that price is $6,000. So you can see there's a range of prices all the way from $1,500 to $15,000 to make RAD happen in your organization. Okay, we've got a few minutes left. Make it 11:43. We're going to finish around 11:45. Richard, did any questions come in?
Yeah, Fred, there is one question, and it is, does RAD replace strategic planning, or should it complement or supplement strategic planning?
Well, we hear that question a lot. It's a great question. And let me just say up front that no, RAD does not replace strategic planning. You're still that long range vision, mission, what you're trying to create with the organization. RAD supports that by saying what needs to be done today so that we're still alive, well, and so that we accomplish the long range plan. Now, very often during the RAD process, you'll discover some things because there is a SWOT analysis in the RAD process. And you may discover some things that will influence your long range plan, which, by the way, long range, the definition of that is changing quite a bit. When we started doing strategic planning, it in fact was like 5 years, 10 years. It shrunk to around 2 or 3. And today we have some firms that our clients are who are actually looking at more like 18 months. But no, RAD does not replace strategic planning. It needs to be aligned with it and needs to support it. Any other questions, Richard?
No, that's the only question for today.
Okay, well, just as well, because it is 11:45 and we wanted to make sure we got through the questions. Let's just look at what we're trying to accomplish today. We wanted to introduce our process for RAD, Rapid Agile Deployment, and we've done that. We wanted to share the key principles to accelerate your planning execution. We've done that. And Richard's gone through some really useful tools and techniques of what you can do to accelerate your process. So listen, for those of you that don't know how to get a hold of us, here is the information. You can visit us at our website, focusmanagement.ca. Certainly contact us using those email addresses, or pick up the phone and give me a call at 905-945-0782. Listen, thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for participating. We know there's lots of things to do these days. So thank you for taking some time out with us. Thanks again, and have a great day.